Hi everyone, I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and we are here today for another one of our Conversations at Home series. I want to remind everybody that we are continuing to raise funds through our COVID-19 fund to support SAG-AFTRA members who are currently out of work due to all of the closed productions. So please check out the link below this video and consider donating if you are able to support in any way. Today we are joined by Bellamy Young, who's currently starring in Prodigal Son, and I'm so thrilled to be joined by her. And actually, one of the reasons that you were one of the first people I thought of when we put together this online program was because you're so connected to audiences and people who are watching your shows online already. And I loved discovering that kind of came from early Scandal days with Kerry Washington and Alison Peters introducing it to Make Appointment TV. So I was curious how, this shutdown has evolved your connectivity online with audiences of Prodigal Son.
Well, I love that you know Allison. That makes me so happy. And thank you for having me, I should say. Thank you for talking to me today and talking about the show. I love it so much. And for anybody who's watching, Allison is Kerry's, tech guru, but also dearest, oldest friend. And they are the ones that foresaw they thought of live tweeting, and Kerry didn't want to be bossy pants about it, so she sort of like nudged Shonda, who nudged us, for the opportunity to partake of the opportunity to live tweet our Scandal shows, and it turned out to be the greatest of joys, and it felt like theater again. We were all a bunch of theater kids at that point. We only had a 7-episode order, and we'd just done it out of love, a little bit like, Judy Garland in the barn with the grease paint. We just sort of like shown up and thrown all of our hearts onto the field. And that had been the year before. So when it was finally airing that next April, we were so excited to share it. And this was such an unprecedented opportunity to really see how people felt about it. Did the jokes land? Did the emotional stuff play? I'd never been a part of anything on screen because I hadn't done a bunch of movies, so I hadn't been to premieres where you can really feel it in the room if it's working or not. But it connected us in such an organic way that we all fell in love with it immediately. But it was really Allison and Kerry who saw that, there was no more appointment TV. And if we wanted to be a successful show, we would need like butts in front of the screens, and so that we had monetary value to ad buyers. So it was a pragmatic approach to making appointment TV, but it had this beautiful dual meaning for us of cementing lifelong relationships with people that some of them whom I've never met. The first person I ever tweeted with her sign is I broccoli, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and I don't remember a lot of things, but and I have so many a real family of people online, and I've seen them graduate from high school, go to nursing school, their mom has been sick, that she's gotten better, they've had babies, they've got new lives now. You all really grow up together, so it's incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it's perfect because that's how everybody's connecting through all of their shows and movies right now anyway. Yeah, I wanted to jump into talking about Prodigal Son and the character of Jessica, and I love the way that you talk about when you first read the script, that you really heard her voice in your head and you felt her rhythms in your body and you knew who she was off the page. And so I was curious, kind of having that really clear initial idea, what your next steps were in developing all the different layers and the nuances and levels of her personality.
Well, it's so funny. This was an offer, which is rare for me. That season, since I get to talk to my fellow SAG members, that season, pilot season, I'd only had one other audition and was feeling very grim about the prospects of working. And my people called with this, and first they said, Michael Sheen, and I was like, I'm in. And then they were like, New York, and I was like, I'm in. And then they're like, do you want to read the script? And I was like, sure. I was already so happy to think that I had a job with those two other amazing elements in place was like gravy. And then I could just, Jessica she was so alive. She was so beautifully written and so vibrant and hilarious and wounded and blousy but also circumspect. It was I was ripping out stitches to get to New York to do it. But then it all happens very quickly. This was like a Friday, and I traveled on a Tuesday, and I started on Wednesday. And so what I find tricky about being offered something, which is always an honor and always a relief, it's also terrifying, because then your audition is your first take in front of your co-workers and the entire crew. And if you haven't had all those conversations with the writers and the creators and the director, if you haven't, words are slippery, but there's something about honing in on that intentionality when everybody really knows what we're all making the same thing. And if you're coming in a little blind, it is really like a sweat it out kind of moment. And so Jessica really came to life by fire with Lee Tolan Krieger that day, that first day I shot. And he's such a wonderful director. If anybody's seen the pilot, you'll know stylistically he's impeccable, but he's also such a kind director that he never, some people can make you feel really, can just get you very self-aware, which is an actor's enemy. And he has a way of making you feel utterly safe, but utterly guided. And so the two of us together. The other thing I'll say is that Lee, the night before we started shooting, invited everyone, cast, crew, production, everyone on the team, to a screening room over on Fifth Avenue. And he had pulled together sort of sizzle reel of each scene of his inspiration. Like, this moment where I'm thinking about this moment in the movie Seven. This moment I'm thinking about this moment in Catch-22. This moment is comedy to me, like the end of Die Hard. And he would play us on the screen the scenes, so we really were all making the same project. But yeah, I credit Lee and the writers and the opportunity. I think there's a magic in the jobs that come and it just being right on time for you. There's real magic in that's outside all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to talk about the trauma that Jessica's experienced, because it's such a unique type of trauma where it's not a case of, I can specifically research this and the way that it affects people, because it's not common knowledge. It's not something that many people have experienced. And even within the characters on the show, they're all experiencing it through their own way. So how did you look at that side of it and how you wanted to play her particular version of trauma?
Well, it was, what I loved is that the trauma has unraveled for her this season. So as I was coming and getting my feet underneath me, being Jessica, living Jessica, she was living more of an aggressively, like in denial life, right? She couldn't have the perfection that she had wanted. She grew up on the Upper East Side. She came from a very wealthy family. She'd been making all these choices towards a very prescribed, perfect life, like her mother had before her and before her and before her. And then she fell in love, right? And she partners with someone who makes choices. And because of his choices, her life goes 90 degrees. And where I met Jessica, she had not gotten back her opportunities sort of within her social strata to intermingle and to be respected. But she had ferociously doubled down on her intent to give her children the best life possible. And so that was the first thing that I could root into. She could booze and pill all day to try and forget about herself and her wounds and her guilt and her questions. But what she was like full, like 18-wheeler force forward on was her kids. And I just love the ferocity of that, like mothering impulse, that it can burn away anything else that's happening. And so that was a great place to meet her. And then as Malcolm has had to confront, his demons and his nightmares, and the truth has come sort of slowly bubbling back to him, Jessica has, because she sees the pain in him and cannot deny the truth of it, had to come face to face with her own trauma and truth and pain. And so it's been wonderful to get to have this season to start to strip free of some of that stricture, to kind of meet Malcolm in this place of vulnerability and fear, but freedom. And it's so interesting because, Ainsley, played by Halston Sage, wonderful Tom Payne plays my son Malcolm, but Ainsley, she sort of thought she dodged the bullet because she was so young when they took away Martin, her father, Michael Sheen. But it's always siblings sort of define an opposition, and Malcolm's been the squeaky wheel. And as he starts to face his demons, take control, march forward, courageously march forward into the light, into the truth, it's really letting her spin out a little and question things. And I've loved watching that ebb and flow this season too.
Yeah, and then obviously there's the unique aspect where you get the flashback scenes, so you have a 20-year gap between the life that she had and the life that we see now. Did you find it useful for yourself to construct that time in between, and how much did you really want to develop out and think about that journey she would have been on over that really large volume of time?
Yeah, I thought a lot about it. The trick is, especially on a first season show, we actors, we have the liberty of, thinking, doing all the homework we can, filling in all the blanks we can, but the writers haven't made a lot of those decisions yet, Some shows they have. Some shows are all written out, mapped out before you shoot them, but ours wasn't the case, and that wasn't the case on Scandal either. Both of these sets of writers have sort of been bravely writing themselves into a corner and then writing themselves out of it. It's very viscerally alive, the choices, less academically made decisions. And so when you come up against filling in the blanks for yourself, Tony and I had this on Scandal too, of filling in some stuff with our marriage, and we made choices that wound up being wrong. But a big rub on Prodigal Son was with Gil. She obviously has a very informed relationship with Gil that has lasted. Clearly, it's not like she never saw him since she arrested her husband. So we spent a lot of time trying to sweet Lou Diamond Phillips and I, prince of a man, I love him so much. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out what that might have been, and really never got an answer. So we played through our idea, and then, people will see in the coming couple of episodes, we finally got a little bit more of a hint. But you're sort of flying blind. So you make choices that serve, and then you adjust, as you get more information down the line.
One of the other aspects that's really interesting about her is the duality. There's the version of her that she presents in public, which is very poised and very together, and then the version that she is at home. So how did you think about the way that those two different versions of her were going to still meld into being the same character?
Well, I just think that was the only bit of truth she'd found for herself, was in the privacy of that home that her family has lived in hundreds of years. They had the first house in that area. They owned all of that land. It's a very, very, storied, rich history there, which she wears like a bit of a mantle. There is no private space, but it also is a safe space. So in as much as she lived a very presentational life all of her childhood and planned to all of her adulthood, the loneliness has been her retreat. So normally, at her age, her mother was throwing parties and having people in and hosting diplomats and doing this. No one comes to her house. So it became her sanctuary, particularly her vanity, where she does her makeup and everything, has really become her therapist's office. She really has started to look in the mirror, drink in the mirror, do whatever in the mirror. But it's the only place she's been honest with herself, because she still can't be honest in real life. She's still got to be brave, because people are still, seating her beside the Madoffs, and, it's still very much, she's very much low on the totem pole in the society world. So it's her only haven.
Yeah. I was curious as well about the physical way that you play her, because that's one of the really interesting things in your performance, like the way that she walks into a room or the way that she carries herself in certain outfits. And that tells you so much about her as well. Did you find that that was an easy aspect of her to construct based on the amount of information that you have about her family history and her heritage and growing up in the society that she mingles in?
You know, Upper East Side was the first place I lived when I moved to Manhattan. And so I had a very specific impression of it. You know, my first New York was that New York. And so it's very much taken from that. But also, it's the tipsiness, it's the, there's a certain recklessness in her buttoned upness that, I don't know, just was so present for me immediately. And I have to say that Katie Riley, who is our wardrobe designer, is a genius. I mean, the way she's constructed each of us to be so specific and so real, and it's a beautiful story she tells. But also Jessica's always, it's always just a little, it's a little too tight, or it's a little too low, or the shoes are a little too high. You know, we're still, if she's going out of the house, she's going out of the house. And so there's a discomfort that serves.
Yeah, there's also a lot of fun in watching the micromanagement that she gives, you know, particularly with her children. And I was curious if that's something that you viewed being part of her personality even before all of this happened, that just is exemplified by what she's been through, or if that was something that you felt like was really developed as part of who she is from what she's gone through.
No, it's very much, it's funny because we, in the pilot episode, I can't remember how we wound up playing it, but there, I think when you see Jessica for the first time, and I'm making tea, I'm at his house and at Malcolm's house, and when I leave, I'm supposed to kiss him, but Sam was like, she would never kiss him. And we were like, yeah, no, right? And so it's, I think she was never a warm mother. I think she had help, and I think she loved her children, but, you know, this shirt is silk, so stay over there. You know what I'm saying? Like, there was distance. And it's been so fun over the course of the season. I remember the first time I touched Malcolm's cheek was he had come to check on Jessica outside of, I can't remember what the episode was about, but he came to check on Jessica, and it turned out that she was going downtown to Bowery because she was funding this homeless, like a building that save and help and feed homeless. And he was like, this is what you're up to. Why do you pretend like you're such a jerk? And in that last scene, as she's leaving, like, she can't even like really say she loves him, and she's apologizing for not being there for him and not being able to be there for him. And I think I just managed to touch his shoulder. I don't even think I touched his cheek in that one, but it was like such a big moment for me and for Tom. And we were like, ooh, you know, but it's grown since then. Now I like fiddle with his little ties and I touch his little face. I feel like she's really like melted in that regard, and all that love. She just has so much love because she has so much to give, and she'd love to get so much in return. But now I just like when she gives him the white suit and she just wants him to look so perfect. I love fussing with him now. It gives me great joy. It's actually one of the things that I've thought about, like, should we all get to go back to work at some point? I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like fidget with Sweet Tom Paine anymore. I don't know if, you know, like it's something.
No face touching right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's something I've thought about.
Yeah. I was also curious about your process on set and the way that you've talked about how, you know, if you kind of need to get into a particular headspace, that you really kind of go off into your own corner and feel a need to kind of separate yourself from everyone else and do that process on your own. And I was curious if that was always part of your process as an actor, or if that was something that you really discovered along the way that was a really useful tool for you.
You know, it's funny. I have a wonderful teacher named Lee Kilmer, Smith, she's a fucking genius. She lives in Los Angeles. I love her with all my heart. I still, even though I haven't gotten to study with her while I've been on this project, I still think of her as my teacher. I still have like, I used to go to her class every Wednesday from 10 to 4. It's still in my phone, like an alarm, just to like root me every time I see it. Like, anyway, she was the first to awaken me to the notion that your job is to connect. So even if you're at an audition and you're in the waiting room, like this kind of self-immolation does not serve. Like, you don't want to throw everybody else off their game either, but, you know, be in the room and see what's in the room and see if there's anybody else who wants to be in the room with you, you know, like that, so that when you walk in the next room, you're already present. You can, you know, take in the casting director, or, you know, if they want to do it a different way, you're like, I'm just in the room. So let's do whatever you want. And so I feel like on set, unless it's a real heavy lifting scene, I'm not a person who can like cry on cue. You don't know how much I wish I were. But I have to really like razor blade myself up inside for those. And that takes music, and that takes focus, and that takes stepping aside. But the rest of the time, I really think the job is connecting. And so that can mean not in a, you know, please shut Bellamy up way, but like in a way that you just keep the energy flowing. And if it's with Phil, who runs the camera, if it's with Tom, because this is your scene with Tom, something just has to be real between you, so that you're not like this, and then they say action, and then you try to be living, breathing humans together. I mean, all they're recording is energy, right? Like, we get the information from the words, but the relationship is what you're playing. And so that's what, I have to say, that's what my process on a television show has become. Plays are different, movies are different, because it's a much more specialized thing and happening incrementally. But when the gift of a television job comes along that you can be a part of for a minute and a half, you get to really be somebody, and you get to really live and evolve with the people who are being the people that are in your world. You're living a double life. And so for me, the greatest technique is to live that life. And I don't ever like sit and make people improv in character, but I just literally mean being humans together, reminding that our hearts are open and we're here because we love it, kind of just connecting.
Yeah. And then also kind of when you're on set, I know that you've talked about the way that you really learned a lot from watching Kerry Washington and how she was as a lead on a show. And I was just interested in how that's influenced your approach on set, and the way that you walked onto set on Prodigal Son, the way that you interact with your cast and with the crew as well.
Kerry is the best. I mean, the best, the most thoughtful, the best friend, the best number one, beautiful actor, like all of it. And the girls in particular on Scandal, we had a lot to learn about being somewhere 7 years. And she was such a, of course, great role model, but better like friend and mentor. Like it wasn't ever unspoken and we have to watch. It was very much, hey, I don't understand how blah, blah, blah. Oh, this is what I've been trying and I invite you to try. Or, you know, like the day she explained red carpet Kerry to us, you know, we were all like, how do you know how to stand on the carpet? And like, what do we do with my hands? And, you know, and she was like, I play a character. She's called Red Carpet Kerry. And this is how Red Carpet Kerry stands. And she, you know, this is how you prepare for that role. And, you know, and so now I do think of her still. You know, I walk on a set and she knew everybody's name. She acknowledged everyone's work, and as it should be, you know, because it's not actors who make a television show. If there were no sets, if there were no lines, if there were no hair and makeup, like, you know, like everybody is an absolutely integral part and should be treated as such. And remembering birthdays and, you know, making people feel special and doing stupid things for no reason and laughing and never complaining. We'd work 17 hours with her 10 months pregnant, and she'd be still in heels and be like everybody's cheerleader. Do you know, we're there to work. We're not there to have therapy or do, you know, like we support each other, but Yeah, I think of her constantly. I am so grateful that I went through that school of training. Tony has funny stories about, like, being in Ghost and Demi wanted me to put him through Star School and that kind of thing, which is the other kind of school. But I had the Kerry Washington school, and that's definitely made all the difference.
Yeah, and even in terms of the character that you played on Scandal with Mellie, I love the way that you describe how it changed you on a molecular level at every point, and it really taught you to take up space in the room more and take ownership of space. So I was curious kind of how you've carried that lesson of taking your own space in a room when it's the right place to do so forward into your work.
Oh my God, that's such a kind question to ask. Yeah, I remain very, very grateful to Mellie and for Mellie, and she made me know deeply that that you always hear that. I don't know if you go to Al-Anon or AA or there's anything like that. Al-Anon is something that I have done, and there's a like act as if kind of tenet, and definitely getting to pretend that it was my way or the highway. Like, definitely that practice helps me daily. So now it's easier for me to have the conversation. I'm always happy to be wrong. I never think I'm right. But if I have a question, now I listen to my instincts and ask the question instead of pretending that I'm supposed to know or that I'll look stupid if I ask. Like, I'm not afraid. Even on set, to say we had a situation with a new director this season, and I had the first line of an act in, and we hadn't covered it. And so you never want to pretend you know more than anybody, but I was like, are you sure we're not going to are we ever going to come around here for that line? Because it's your act in. And, and I would never have said that 7 years ago, 5 years ago. Yeah. But you're also there to fully be you, Nobody wants your silence. Nobody wants your quiet fear. Everybody wants the full force of your being, your talent, your intellect, and have the conversations about the script, have the conversations about whatever's happening in the room, the dynamic. What's important is that we make the best project possible. And so that has happened also in my real life. I'm more aware of when my fear is talking and when my faith is talking, and I just will have conversations I would have never had before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you touched about this a little bit when you were talking earlier about when you're going into an audition and the way that you kind of take that space in the hallway. But I was just interested if there's any things that you've really found for yourself that help ground you as you walk into the room and step into that space and give that reading that have been really useful to you throughout your career.
Giving up perfectionism. Hey, that's a good one. I'll go back to Lee again. For me, I really have to know my lines, right? Like, if I go in and I don't know my lines, then I doubt myself, and then it's a shit show. That seems like a dumb thing to say, but I do think there's a lot of people who like to rewrite or say something sort of like it, and that's not how I like to do it. You've given me something, we can talk about how I feel about it. I'm happy to have that conversation, but my job is to interpret it, inhabit it, bring it to life. So Lee always gave us this, Lee, my acting coach, always gave us this, or suggested this. I use my voice memo. If I have a scene, I say all the lines like a robot into my voice memo without stopping, no punctuation, no nothing like this, just both characters. And then I go back and then I record it again and I pretend that I'm the other character and I leave room. And then I say, and when I know it cold, just like a robot inside and out, then all I have to do, then I can forget it. Then I really just have to be present in the waiting room, be present in the audition room. Oh, we can make this a comedy. Oh, we can make this a tragedy. Oh, we can make this, I don't know, Elizabethan, like a Sondheim musical. It's just the flexibility, the flexibility to be present and give something that surprises you, much less them.
Yeah, I think that's all amazing advice. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk. And I hope that everyone watching this, if they haven't already jumped into Prodigal Son, will check it out. It's a great binge watch for quarantine time. And thank you for joining us today, Bellamy.
Thank you.